It's strange how silence can sound like heartbreak. 2 years ago, the woman I loved vanished. No goodbye, no explanation. Just a cold message that read, "I can't do this anymore." The day she disappeared was the day we lost our child, and in a single heartbeat, I lost everything else: her laughter, her scent, her half-slept good nights. I searched for her everywhere: hospitals, old addresses, even her mother's house. Nothing. She was a ghost, one I kept trying to resurrect through memories I should have buried. And when I finally began to breathe again, she returned. Not as a lover, not as the woman who once promised forever, but as my psychiatrist. She walked into the room wearing that same white sweater I bought her before the miscarriage, only this time she didn't recognize me. Or maybe she pretended not to. Either way, I felt something die again, but this time I didn't run, because I wanted answers. And if she thought she could heal me without confronting what she broke, she was wrong. The clock on the wall clicks like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to me. 1, 2, 3. Each second slices through the air between us, clean and merciless. She sits across from me, framed by the pale window light, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. The white coat she wears drapes like a shield, sterile and unblemished. I used to know every inch of her: how her hair used to fall into her coffee when she worked late, how her laughter echoed when she caught me staring too long. But here, now, she's a stranger with a clipboard. Her nameplate reads Dr. Yun-ha, written in clean professional letters. But I can still hear the echo of the way I used to say it, whispered, breathless. Yun-ha. I swallow the name before it escapes. She doesn't look up yet, too busy flipping through papers pretending to focus. I pretend too. Pretend that my heart isn't caving in. Pretend that the scent of lavender in the air isn't hers. "Let's start simple," she says finally, voice calm, rehearsed. "What brings you here today?" Her tone is soft but detached, the way you'd speak to a patient, not a person you once promised eternity to. Her pen hovers, waiting. I force my voice steady. "I was told you specialize in loss." She blinks, almost imperceptibly. Her eyes, still that same deep brown, tighten for just a second before she writes something down. The scratching sound of the pen feels surgical, cutting through the fragile quiet. "Loss," she repeats as if testing the word on her tongue. "Can you describe what kind?" Her question hits me like a wind I wasn't braced for. What kind? How do I begin to explain that I lost everything in one heartbeat? I inhale, but it hurts. Someone I loved disappeared after we lost something precious. Her pen pauses. I watch her throat tighten, a muscle twitching just below her jawline. She tries to hide it, but I see. God, I see everything. The guilt she's buried, the tremor she hides behind professionalism. She clears her throat. Abandonment, then. The word tastes poisonous. I want to laugh. Abandonment. Such a clinical term for what she did. She abandoned not just me, but herself. Our home, our future, our child. Yes, I say, my voice quieter than I intend. Abandonment fits. She nods, scribbling again, as if labeling my pain makes it easier to understand. The tip of her pen glides across the paper, steady but shaking near the end. "You said, after a loss?" I watch her eyes carefully. They won't meet mine. The last time I saw those eyes, they were hollow, staring at a hospital wall that refused to give back the sound of a heartbeat. Now, she hides behind distance and duty. "Yes," I whisper, "a loss neither of us could recover from." Her hand trembles. The pen drops. The soft click echoes louder than it should. Her mask cracks, just slightly, but enough. Enough for me to recognize her again. For 2 years, I thought I'd imagined her, that my grief had created a ghost that walked in my dreams. But she's here, flesh and bone and guilt, and I don't know whether to reach for her or recoil. She bends to pick up the pen, her fingers brushing the floor. When she straightens, I see the faint scar near her wrist, the one from when she tried to hang that painting in our first apartment, the one she swore she'd keep forever as proof of her clumsiness. She didn't erase everything after all. "Sorry," she murmurs, voice shaking slightly. "Please, continue." I lean back in my chair, studying her. "It's strange," I say. "You remind me of someone I used to know." The words hang between us like smoke. Her face goes still. No blink, no breath, just stillness. She forces a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. People say that sometimes. Faces repeat in different lives. Different lives. Maybe that is what this is. Some cruel second life where we both exist as shadows of what we were. Maybe, I say, but the resemblance is uncanny. Her fingers clutch the pen too tightly, her knuckles pale. "Let's not get distracted," she says softly. "You were saying you lost someone." The way she says someone feels deliberate, detached, like she's afraid to name it, like the word child might shatter her. So I make her face it. "I lost my partner," I say slowly, "and our baby." The silence that follows is unbearable. Her hand trembles again, but this time she doesn't hide it. A single tear forms at the corner of her eye, but she blinks it away before it can fall. "I'm sorry," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. That must have been devastating. It is the same voice she used to use when she couldn't bear to tell me bad news. Gentle, trembling, pretending to be strong. And something inside me snaps. "Do you really understand?" I ask before I can stop myself. Her head lifts, startled. "What?" "When you say you understand," I continue, my voice sharper, "do you mean it? Or is that just part of the script you say to everyone who's broken?" The words echo too loudly in the quiet room. She looks at me, really looks, for the first time, and for a fleeting second, I see her soul crack open. Then, just as quickly, she seals it shut. "I'm here to help you process your pain," she says, her tone steady but eyes glassy. I lean forward. "You can't help me process it when you're the reason it exists." The air thickens. Even the clock on the wall seems to stop. Her lips part, but no sound comes out. I can feel her heart beating across the room, chaotic and panicked, mirroring mine. For a moment, I think she'll confess, that she'll drop the mask and say, "I am sorry," and we'll both finally breathe. But instead, she straightens her back, lifts the pen again and writes something down. Professional. Cold. The version of her that left me behind. I exhale, half laugh, half grieve. "You're really going to pretend, aren't you?" Her voice breaks just a little. "Pretend what?" "That you don't know me." Silence again. Her pen stops moving. Her gaze lifts, and this time, she doesn't hide the tears in her eyes. "I think that's enough for today," she whispers. I should leave, walk out. But I don't move. I just stare at her, memorizing the way her lips tremble, the way her fingers twist together in guilt. "I'm not angry," I lie. "I just want to understand." Her lips part, as if she might say something. Her throat moves, struggling with words she can't afford to speak. Finally, she says, "Some things aren't meant to be understood in one session." She stands. The faint scent of her perfume lingers, lavender and regret. She opens the door for me. I walk toward it slowly, my steps heavy. But before I cross the threshold, I stop. "You look familiar," I say quietly without turning around. The words hang in the air, trembling. Behind me, I hear her breath hitch, sharp and unguarded. Her pen slips from her fingers and hits the floor again. The sound is small, but to me, it's deafening. I turn my head slightly, just enough to catch her reflection in the glass door. Her eyes, wide, wet, guilty, meet mine for the briefest second. And in that moment, the air feels thick with everything we never said. The rain starts outside, soft at first, then heavier, like the sky itself is trying to wash us clean. I step out, letting it hit my face, letting it hide the tears I didn't know I still had. Behind me, through the door's reflection, I see her sink into her chair, burying her face in her hands. The storm outside howls, and inside that hollow room, I leave her drowning in the silence she created. But for the first time in 2 years, I'm not the only one haunted anymore. There was a time when the world felt small enough to fit in the palm of our hands. A time when morning smelled like coffee and turpentine, and her laughter painted the walls brighter than sunlight ever could. 2 years ago, before the silence, before the loss, before the vanishing, there was us. Our apartment was barely big enough for 2 people to breathe in, but somehow it held our entire universe. There were unfinished canvases leaning against every wall, their colors bleeding like unspoken dreams. My desk sat by the window, cluttered with half-written manuscripts and coffee stains shaped like memories. Yuna always said art was our prayer. That painting was how she confessed to the world what she couldn't say out loud. And I, ever the fool in love, wrote about her even when I swore I wouldn't. She seeped into every sentence, every metaphor, until my stories weren't mine anymore. They were hers. She used to hum when she painted. Low, tuneless, but soft enough to make the air still. I remember watching her one evening, her hair tied up loosely, streaks of paint on her fingers, the sunset glinting off her eyelashes. "Stop staring," she teased without looking up. "I'm not," I lied. "You are," she said, smiling. "You always do that when you're in love." I didn't deny it, because in that moment, everything in me ached to freeze time, to keep her there forever, bathed in the gold of a dying sun, laughing softly at the man who couldn't look away. When she told me she was pregnant, it was raining, the kind of rain that hums against the window, steady and gentle, like the heartbeat of a new beginning. I remember her standing by the stove, stirring instant ramen, her hands trembling. She didn't say it right away. She just kept glancing at me, her lips parting and closing again. Finally, she whispered, "I need to tell you something." I laughed nervously. "You're not breaking up with me, are you?" Her eyes softened, glistening. "No, idiot. The opposite." She placed my hand against her stomach, and I swear, I felt something. Not physically, not yet, but spiritually, like the faint pulse of a promise. "We're going to have a baby," she said, her voice breaking into laughter and tears all at once. I froze. Then the world cracked open. I didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or drop to my knees. So I did all 3, and she laughed. Really laughed, the way she used to before the shadows came. We sat on the kitchen floor, bowls of ramen forgotten, my hands resting over the fragile miracle that now connected us in a way deeper than love. She whispered the name before I could. "Ari," she said softly. "It means Lion of God." "Ari," I repeated, tasting the syllable like a secret prayer. "Strong. Brave. Like you." She smiled faintly. Like us. And for the first time in my life, I believed in forever. Our apartment changed after that day. The walls seemed brighter. Every corner held a future. We painted the small spare room pale yellow because she said yellow meant hope. I started writing again. Stories about fathers and promises. She began sketching tiny animals, pinning them to the nursery wall. Rabbits, foxes, a small lion cub that looked suspiciously like me. We'd lie on the couch at night, her head on my chest, her hand tracing idle circles where our child was growing. Sometimes she'd whisper, "Do you think Ari will have your eyes?" I'd laugh. "No, definitely yours." I want the world to see how beautiful they are." The world was quiet then, gentle. Every night felt sacred, every heartbeat a lullaby. But love is cruel when it's too perfect. It fools you into thinking it can't shatter. The first crack appeared so small, I almost missed it. She stopped humming while painting. Her laughter, once effortless, became forced, thinner somehow, like she was running out of air. At first, I thought she was just tired. Pregnancy changes everything, right? The hormones, the exhaustion. I told myself it was normal. But one night I woke to find her sitting by the window, her knees pulled to her chest, eyes fixed on the city lights below. "Can't sleep?" I asked gently. She didn't answer. When I touched her shoulder, she flinched. Just slightly, but enough. "I'm fine," she said quickly, her tone brittle. "Yunya." I said I'm fine. Her reflection in the glass was ghostly. For the first time, she looked like someone I didn't recognize. I didn't press her, because I was afraid of what she might say. Days turned into weeks. The yellow nursery stayed half-painted. The brushes dried on the easel. Sometimes I'd find her staring at her hands for long stretches, as if they didn't belong to her anymore. She stopped painting altogether. When I asked why, she just whispered, "I'm scared of colors now." That broke something in me. The woman who once told me colors were the language of her soul now feared them. And I, selfishly, didn't know how to fix her. I wrote her letters I never gave her. Letters where I confessed my helplessness, my guilt, my terror of losing her to something invisible. I hid them in the drawer beside our bed, as if words could someday bridge the silence between us. One evening, I came home early from work. The apartment was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. The air felt thick, heavy. I found her standing before the unfinished painting Shichihiran D started weeks ago. A portrait of the three of us. Her, me, and a small golden-haired child between us. Only now she'd smeared gray across the canvas, wiping out the faces until all that was left were shadows. "Why did you do that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't answer. "Yunha, talk to me, please." She turned to me then, tears streaking her cheeks. "Because it hurts to hope." Her words pierced deeper than any knife. "Don't say that," I whispered, stepping closer. "We're going to be okay. We'll get through this." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. I feel like something inside me is dying. And I can't stop it." I held her then, but she stood stiff in my arms as if my touch couldn't reach her anymore. The rain started again outside, tapping against the windows like soft apologies from the sky. We stood there in the half-dark, surrounded by ruined art and unspoken fear. And for the first time I realized the distance between us wasn't measured in steps. It was in everything we no longer said. A week later, I found her sketchbook under the bed. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The first few pages were familiar. Sketches of us laughing, of the nursery, of the tiny lion cub. But as I turned the pages, the drawings changed. They grew darker, more desperate. One showed her standing alone under rain that looked like knives. Another, me, with hollow eyes, holding a baby made of smoke. And the last page, a drawing of herself, faceless, holding a broken heart in her hands. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to confront her, but what could I say? That I see your pain? That I'm terrified too? Instead, I placed the sketchbook back where I found it, and sat beside her sleeping form that night, listening to her restless breathing, promising myself I'd fix it all somehow. I didn't know that some storms don't want to be fixed. They want to consume. The next morning, she smiled at me again. A small, tired smile, but it was real. "Let's finish the nursery today," she said. It felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. We painted until evening, laughing between the chaos of spilled paint and soft music. For a few hours, she seemed like herself again. Warm, alive, teasing me for being clumsy. And as I watched her dance barefoot across the room, yellow streaks on her arms, I thought, maybe love really can heal everything. But when night came and she fell asleep beside me, I caught her whispering something in her dreams. A single word, over and over. Sorry. I woke before dawn the next day. The world outside was wrapped in fog. She was still asleep, her face turned toward me, peaceful for once. I reached out to touch her cheek, and I remember thinking, this is what heaven must look like. I didn't know that morning would be the last time she'd ever look at me the same way. The beginning of the end doesn't always come with thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the way someone stops humming, in the way color fades from a canvas, in the way love turns into something too heavy to hold. And though I didn't see it then, I realize now, she was already slipping away, one heartbeat at a time. The storm came without warning. Not the kind that howls through windows or floods the streets. No, this one tore through the quiet spaces inside us. It began with a scream that wasn't hers or mine, but the world's. The doctors moved around us in frantic whispers, white coats blurring like ghosts. I remember the sterile light above us, too bright, too merciless. I remember her hand gripping mine, so tightly I could feel the bones straining, her nails cutting into my skin. It's going to be okay, I kept saying, even though I could already see the truth in her eyes. The monitors were screaming in tones I didn't understand. A nurse said something about no heartbeat. Another said, prepare him. And just like that, the universe stopped breathing. One moment, I was holding her, her voice trembling, her tears burning my palm, and the next, her body went still. Her eyes opened, but they weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking somewhere far away, into a world where sound didn't exist. Yunha, I whispered, shaking her shoulders. Yunha, look at me. She didn't. There was no storm outside, yet it felt like the world was flooding inside the room. The heart monitor fell silent, and in that stillness, something inside both of us broke. The doctor spoke softly, too softly, as if gentleness could blunt the blade. I'm sorry, the baby didn't make it. That sentence split me in half. I felt her fingers slip from mine, and for the first time in my life, I wished I couldn't feel anything at all. They said it happens. They said it's common. As if loss could ever be common. They handed us paperwork, forms, empty condolences disguised as procedure, and I signed them all with shaking hands, my vision blurring through tears I refused to wipe away. Una said nothing. She stared at the tiny bundle they offered us, a memory too small to hold, and turned her face away. I remember the rain starting outside as we left the hospital. It was gentle at first, then heavier, until the world became a blur of gray. She walked beside me in silence, her steps slow, deliberate, like each one took something from her. I tried to reach for her hand, but she slipped it into her coat pocket. We drove home without a word. The windshield wipers beat rhythmically, an imitation of the heartbeat we'd lost. When we got home, the apartment felt foreign. The yellow-painted nursery door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the light was soft, golden, almost cruel in its warmth. She walked straight to the crib we'd assembled together. Her fingertips traced the edge of it, the same way she once traced my skin when she painted me in the morning light. Then she turned to the wall. The unfinished painting stared back at us. Our family beneath a cherry blossom tree, sunlight filtering through branches that no longer existed. She picked up the brush and, without a word, dragged black across it. I ran to her, grabbed her wrist. Yuna, stop! Please! But she didn't. The brush trembled, the colors smeared, and I could see something wild in her eyes. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. He's gone. I know, I whispered, my throat raw, but I'm still here. You're still here. She looked at me then, really looked, and in that instant, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't. Not anymore. The funeral was small. Just her, me, and a box too small to carry a lifetime of dreams. No music, no words, just rain and the sound of earth swallowing what was left of our future. I tried to speak, to say something that might hold her together, but the moment I opened my mouth, she turned away. Her umbrella slipped from her hand and rolled down the hill. Forgotten. She didn't even watch it go. After that, she stopped speaking altogether. Days blurred into nights. Nights into something quieter than death. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, floating from room to room without sound. She ate little, slept less. I'd wake to find her sitting at the foot of the bed, staring at the window as if waiting for someone who would never come back. Sometimes I'd hear her whisper things when she thought I was asleep. "I'm sorry. I should have protected you. I wasn't enough." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she was everything, but she never listened. The distance between us became a living thing. It grew from the silence, feeding on our guilt, our grief, our inability to reach across the void. I started writing again, anything to feel alive. But every word turned into her name. Every sentence, a confession I couldn't send. One night, I placed my hand on her shoulder, desperate to feel her warmth. She flinched. That tiny movement destroyed me. I kept hoping the next morning would be different, that she'd look at me and see something worth staying for. But grief doesn't heal in mornings. It hides in them. One dawn, I woke to an emptiness that felt wrong. The air was too still, too clean. Her side of the bed was cold. At first, I thought she'd gone to the kitchen, maybe for tea. But the silence in the apartment was absolute. I called her name once, then twice. Nothing. The bathroom door was open. The lights off. The easel by the window. Empty. The painting of us beneath the tree. Gone. Then I saw it. Shreds of canvas scattered across the floor. The tree, our faces, the child in her arms, all torn apart. In the corner of the desk, a single sheet of paper lay folded, her handwriting trembling across it. "Forgive me." Just 2 words. The ink smudged, as if she'd written them through tears. I remember standing there, the note shaking in my hand, feeling the air collapse around me. Forgive me. For what? For leaving? For breaking? For loving me so much it destroyed her? I ran through the apartment like a madman, checked the closet, the balcony, the stairwell. Her shoes were gone, her clothes, even her phone. Everything that belonged to her had vanished, except the faint scent of lavender, clinging to the air like memory refusing to fade. That was the day everything fell silent. For weeks, I replayed it all. Every smile, every word, every missed sign I should have seen. I blamed myself for not holding her tighter, for not noticing she was drowning while I kept trying to build lifeboats out of hope. I searched for her everywhere. Hospitals, galleries, her mother's house, even online. But she was gone, as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Sometimes I'd dream of her standing under the cherry blossom tree from the painting, our baby in her arms. She'd smile, soft and sad, then turn away as petals fell like snow. I'd wake up crying, whispering her name into the darkness, but she never answered. The world moved on. People stopped asking where she went. Friends sent messages at first, then stopped when they realized I didn't know either. The apartment became a mausoleum of what once was. The yellow nursery door stayed closed. I couldn't bear to open it. I lived in fragments. In half-finished letters, unopened curtains, cups of coffee that went cold before I remembered to drink them. Sometimes, when it rained, I'd imagine her out there somewhere. Alone, walking beneath an umbrella she forgot how to hold, whispering apologies to no one. And though anger should have saved me, it didn't. Because how do you hate someone who left carrying your heart? Months later, I finally found the courage to open the nursery door again. The air inside was thick with dust and memory. Sunlight slanted across the crib, illuminating specks of gold paint she'd left on the wall. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, holding her note. The edges were frayed now, but the words still cut deep. Forgive me. The question that haunted me wasn't why she left. It was whether she wanted me to. Forgive her. Forget her. Move on. But how do you forgive someone who erases you? Not out of cruelty, but because they couldn't bear to remember you. I pressed the note against my chest, whispering into the silence. I would have forgiven you if you'd just stayed. Outside, thunder rumbled, a distant echo of that night in the hospital. And for a fleeting second, I thought I heard her voice in the rain. Soft, apologetic. I'm sorry. The wind carried it away before I could answer. I sat there until nightfall, the note trembling in my hands, the world dimming around me. And as the rain began again, tapping softly against the window pane, I realized something cruel but true. The day she left wasn't the day I lost her. I'd been losing her long before that. One silence at a time, one tear, one heartbeat. Until all that was left was this hollow quiet, the kind that doesn't fade, only waits. There's a strange kind of silence that follows loss. Not the silence of peace, no. It's the kind that hums under your skin, heavy and endless, like the world forgot how to breathe. After she left, time didn't move forward. It only fell. Days bled into nights, nights into something darker than sleep. I stopped opening the curtains. The light felt too cruel. The walls of our apartment began to rot with quiet, the kind that eats at you, one heartbeat at a time. Her scent still lingered on the pillow, faint lavender and paint thinner. Every time I lay down, I'd catch it again, and it would drag me under. Back to mornings when she would hum softly while painting by the window, sunlight tangled in her hair. I'd reach out sometimes, half asleep, expecting to feel her there, but the space beside me was always cold. That's when I started talking to the emptiness. At first, I told myself it was just habit, but habit doesn't answer back with echoes. I'd find myself whispering her name into the dark, asking questions no one could answer. Are you warm? Did you eat? Do you still dream of us? The air never replied, but somehow I heard her silence loud enough to break me all over again. The city moved on without me. Every street corner whispered her name in ways only I could hear. There was that cafe we used to haunt on rainy afternoons, the one with cracked mugs and lemon tarts she loved but never finished. I'd stand outside watching couples sit at our table, their laughter slicing through me like glass. I couldn't go in. I couldn't bear to see the chair where she once sat, painting tiny portraits on napkins while pretending to listen to me talk about deadlines and drafts. My editor stopped calling. Deadlines came and went. The words inside me had dried up, leaving only silence. I wasn't a writer anymore. I was a ghost, carrying paper memories. Friends tried to reach out at first, dinners, calls, messages I left unopened. But how do you talk to someone who's no longer living in the same reality? Eventually, even they stopped trying. That was fine. Ghosts don't need company. One night, it rained. The same kind of rain that had followed us home from the hospital. The kind that knew exactly how to sound like her crying. I sat by the window, a glass of untouched whiskey on the table. The city lights blurred behind the raindrops, each one falling, shattering, disappearing, like tiny versions of our story replaying endlessly. The wind brushed through the slightly open window, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice again, soft and faint. When it rains, even the sky grieves. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles whitened. Then, it must love us a lot, I whispered back. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered, a low echo that filled the room. I didn't pick up the pieces. I couldn't even move. Days later, I found myself digging through the drawers of her old art desk. It wasn't planned. Nothing was in those days. I was just looking for something to prove she had existed outside my memories. And then I found it. Her sketchbook, black cover, worn edges, paint fingerprints smudged across it like ghosts of creation. I hesitated before opening it. My heart thudded once, hard like it was warning me. Don't look. But grief doesn't listen. It hungers. The first page was a portrait of me, smiling, carefree. My eyes bright in a way they hadn't been for a long time. The second page, me again. But my smile was softer this time, almost fading. The third, me, asleep on the couch, a blanket half slipping off my shoulders. I turned the pages faster, one after another, each one another version of myself seen through her eyes. Some were colored, some were just pencil sketches. In one, my hands were covered in ink. In another, I was looking at her instead of the camera. And then I reached the middle of the book. The drawings changed. My face began to distort. The lines grew rougher, darker, my eyes hollow, my chest blurred, as if she couldn't bring herself to finish it. And then I saw it, a sketch of me with a hole in my chest where my heart should have been. The space was completely empty, torn through the paper. I stared at it until I felt the world tilt. She hadn't just drawn me. She'd dissected me. Page by page, she'd been mourning me even before she left. That realization hit harder than anything else. She hadn't left suddenly. She'd been erasing herself long before the note. I kept turning. Near the end of the book, there was one more drawing. Not of me, not of her, but of us. We stood under a tree, unfinished, just a faint outline of branches spreading above us. Her hand in mine. No faces, no details, just silhouettes. But beneath it, she had written a single line. Maybe, in another life, we'll stay. That's when it hit me. She hadn't just left me. She'd left herself, too. Whatever light had been inside her, the one that painted, that laughed, that loved, it had gone out long before her body walked out the door. And I hadn't seen it. I closed the sketchbook, holding it against my chest. It felt like holding her heart. Fragile, heavy, and already breaking. The apartment seemed smaller that night, the air thicker. The shadows on the wall looked like the remnants of her presence, frozen mid-goodbye. I wanted to scream, to break something, to beg the universe to rewind. But all I did was sit there, listening to the sound of my own breathing, like it belonged to someone else. I ran my fingers along the torn hole in the sketch of my chest. It was paper, but it felt real, because that's exactly what I'd become. A man with a missing heart, still pretending to be alive. Weeks passed, maybe months. Time had lost its meaning. The sketchbook became my only companion. Every night I'd open it again, tracing her lines, trying to find her in the graphite strokes. Sometimes I'd whisper to the drawings. Other times, I'd close it fast, afraid that if I kept looking, I'd disappear into those pages too. I started dreaming of her again. Not the real her, the painted version. She'd stand in the rain, hair dripping, her eyes the same shade of sorrow she used to paint with. "Why did you stop painting?" I'd ask, and she'd smile, small and tired. "Because you stopped living." Then I'd wake up to find the sketchbook open again, even if I swore I'd left it closed. Always on that same page, the hole in my chest. One morning, I decided to go outside. The first time in months. The air was cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs. The city moved around me like a film on fast forward. Cars, voices, lives I no longer belonged to. I ended up at the art supply store where she used to buy her brushes. The owner recognized me immediately. "Long time no see," he said gently. "She used to come here every week." I nodded, unable to reply. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small box. "She ordered this months ago, never came to pick it up." Inside was a brand new sketchbook, untouched, blank. He placed it in my hands. "Maybe it was meant for you." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That night, I sat by the window again, the rain tapping softly against the glass. The old sketchbook lay open beside the new one filled with her ghosts, the other waiting for mine. I picked up her pencil from the drawer, the one with bite marks near the end. For the first time in a long while, my hand didn't tremble, and I drew her. Not the broken version that left, but the one who laughed when paint splattered her cheeks, the one who used to say that art was how she made sense of pain, the one who made me believe that love could be immortalized in color. When I finished, the page was smudged with tears, but it was the truest thing I'd created since she left. I placed the drawing beside her sketchbook and whispered, "Maybe in another life, we'll stay." Outside, thunder rumbled softly, like an answer. For the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt as much. It still lived inside me, but now it was quieter, gentler. A ghost I could finally live with. It had been 2 years since I last heard her voice. 2 years since silence became the only language between us. And yet, here she was, sitting across from me in this dimly lit therapy room, the smell of antiseptic and coffee blending with something achingly familiar. She looked different, but not unfamiliar. Her hair was shorter now, neater, as if she'd trimmed away the chaos of her past. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, practiced, deliberate. The kind of voice designed to anchor broken people. But I could feel the tremor beneath it, the storm she was hiding behind that professionalism. "Good afternoon," she said, her tone smooth. "I'm Dr. Yun-ha. You must be Mr. Seo." Mr. Seo. The name felt foreign in her mouth, like she was tasting it for the first time. I nodded, my face calm. "Yeah, that's me." My voice didn't shake. It surprised me that it didn't. She smiled then, soft, clinical, polite, but her eyes flickered for half a second. A small crack in the wall she'd built. It was enough. The room was painfully quiet. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner filled the space between us. She picked up her pen, slender, silver, familiar, and began to write something on her notepad. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to ask what brings you here today." Her tone was professional, almost distant. But that was the thing about distance. It's most noticeable when you had once known the warmth. I could still remember how that same voice once whispered in my ear as we lay tangled in sheets, her laughter muffled against my chest. "What brings me here? You." But I didn't say that. Instead, I leaned back slightly, forcing a small smile. "I guess. I've been having trouble sleeping. Flashbacks, nightmares. Sometimes I wake up and—" I stopped, my throat tightening. "Sometimes I think I hear her voice." Her pen hesitated for a fraction of a second, then continued. "I see," she said softly. "You mentioned her voice. Who is she?" I stared at her for a moment. She met my gaze, unflinching, but I saw it. The faint tremor in her left hand, the way her thumb rubbed the edge of the pen like a nervous tick. I took a breath. "My wife," I said slowly. "She left after we lost our child." The word child hung between us like a blade. Her pen froze mid-sentence. A silence stretched across the room, fragile, unbearable. Then she looked up. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes shattered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It was meant to sound professional, but her voice broke halfway through like an old wound reopening. I almost pitied her then. Almost. The air thickened. I could hear the sound of her breathing, steady, practiced, but just slightly off rhythm. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees. Her name was Un-ha, I said, letting the name fall like a confession. Her hand trembled. Barely, but I saw it. Her knuckles tightened around the pen until it nearly bent. She didn't speak. Didn't have to. That silence told me everything. I used to think she was the kind of person who loved quietly, I continued, my tone softer now, almost nostalgic. The kind who would rather paint her feelings than speak them. Her lips parted slightly. A flicker of pain crossed her face before she forced it down, locking it behind that professional mask. "Do you still think that?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I smiled faintly. No. I think she loved too loudly, but only in ways I didn't know how to hear. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She looked away, pretending to jot something down, as if paper could hide the sound of heartbreak. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt powerful. But all I felt was tired. Seeing her again, like this, wasn't revenge. It was resurrection, and resurrection hurts more than death. "Do you believe in forgiveness?" I asked suddenly. She blinked, startled. "Forgiveness?" "Yeah." I met her gaze. "Do you think some people don't deserve it?" Her lips parted, then closed again. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, "I think sometimes forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs peace more." Peace. A word that felt foreign in her mouth. I nodded slowly. And who needed it more? The one who left or the one who stayed? Her pen clattered onto the desk. That sound. It wasn't loud, but it cut through me like thunder in a funeral. Her eyes lifted to mine. They were glassy now, swimming with all the words she couldn't say. "I'm sorry," she said again. But this time, it wasn't the kind of sorry meant for a patient. It was the kind that begged for absolution. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe it was just that I had grown used to seeing her as a ghost, larger than life, untouchable, frozen in my grief. Now, sitting across from me, she was just a woman. A trembling, human woman, haunted by the same memories I carried like scars. I leaned back in the chair, studying her. "You're very good at this," I said softly, pretending not to remember. Her breath caught. "I'm not pretending," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her. "Then tell me," I said, leaning closer. "What does it feel like to counsel a man whose life you once destroyed?" She flinched. The air between us cracked open, thick with everything we'd never said. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, barely audible. "Then why did you leave?" Her lips parted, but no words came. "Was it guilt?" I pressed. "Fear? Or did you just wake up one morning and decide you didn't love me anymore?" Tears welled up, trembling in her eyes. "Please, stop." I almost did, but pain makes you cruel, especially when you've spent years drowning in silence. I stood slowly, pacing toward the window. The rain had started again outside. Of course it had. It always did when the world wanted to mimic my grief. "She was painting that morning," I said, more to myself than to her. "A tree, 2 people underneath it. When I came back, it was torn apart." Her sob was soft, almost inaudible. "I remember," she whispered. I turned then. Her shoulders shook as she tried to hide her face behind her hands. The woman who once painted light into every corner of my life was now just breaking. And God help me, part of me wanted to hold her, the other part wanted her to drown in it. After what felt like hours, she spoke again, her voice brittle but clear. "When we lost Ari," she began, I thought I lost the right to be loved." Her words sliced through the air. I'd close my eyes and hear her heartbeat, still, and I couldn't breathe. Every time you touched me, I felt her absence like a scream under my skin. She wiped her eyes, trembling. "I wasn't running from you," she whispered. "I was running from what I became." I stared at her, every muscle in my body tight. And just like that, the anger in me began to crack. Not disappear, but soften. Because behind her words, I heard it. The same grief that had buried me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly. "Why didn't you let me drown with you?" She smiled sadly, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Because you still believed in mornings." The room went silent again, the kind of silence that hums. Minutes passed before I spoke. "You remember Ari's name," I said softly. Her head lifted. Our eyes met. "Of course I do," she whispered. "I named her." And then, for the first time since she walked back into my life, I saw her. Not as a doctor, not as a ghost, but as the woman who had once whispered that same name into my chest as if it were a prayer. I swallowed hard. "You called her Lion of God." She nodded, tears streaming freely now. "Because I wanted her to be brave, even if I wasn't." The clock on the wall ticked, cruel and loud. Neither of us moved. Then, almost instinctively, I smiled. A broken, bitter smile. "Now I know," I said. "You remember everything." Her breath hitched. "Please," she whispered, "don't say it like that." "Like what?" "Like remembering me is a crime." I wanted to answer, to tell her that remembering was all I'd done since she left. But the words caught in my throat. Because how do you tell someone that your life stopped the day theirs walked away? The session ended in silence. She didn't look at me as I stood, didn't move as I reached for the door, but just before I left, she spoke again, her voice so faint I almost missed it. "Sio." I froze. That name. The way she said it. Soft, trembling, the way she used to whisper it against my neck. I turned, just enough to meet her gaze. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. Maybe she was. "I'm sorry," she said again, voice cracking. I smiled, but it wasn't cruel this time. Just tired. "Don't be," I said softly. "It's not your apology I came for." And then I left, the echo of her name following me down the hallway like a heartbeat that refused to die. Outside, the sky had turned gray. Rain tapped gently on my shoulders, soaking through my shirt. For a moment, I stood there, staring at the building behind me, the one where ghosts wore white coats and called themselves healers. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Because she remembered. And sometimes that's enough to start again. The first time I walked into her office, the air felt like memory. Clean, sterile. But beneath the faint scent of coffee and lavender, there was the ghost of something familiar. Her perfume, the one she used to wear when she painted. It clung to the walls, soft as regret. She greeted me with that practiced smile therapists wear, the kind that hides more than it reveals. "Mr. Han," she said, voice calm, distant. "Please, sit." Mr. Han. The name fell between us like a brick wall. 2 years ago, she used to call me Jun, whisper it against my shoulder when the world grew heavy. Now she said my surname like she was cleansing herself of the past. I sat, pretended not to notice her trembling hands as she adjusted her notepad. Pretended not to recognize the scar on her wrist, the one she got from breaking a glass while trying to cook for the first time. Pretended not to see the ghosts swimming in her eyes. Because if I did, I might not survive this room. For weeks, we performed the same ritual. I'd sit on the couch staring at the clock behind her head, and she'd ask questions she already knew the answers to. "How did that make you feel? What do you think you're really grieving?" Her voice never wavered, but sometimes her pen stopped moving, especially when I mentioned her. The woman who left. The woman who once painted my laughter into sunsets. I loved her, I'd say, even when she stopped loving herself. Yunha's breath would hitch, just for a second. Then she'd nod, writing something that looked suspiciously like escape, professional detachment, a fortress made of ink and denial. But pain has patience, and I'd learned to wait. By the 5th session, the distance between us felt like a glass wall, transparent, yet impossible to cross. Sometimes our reflections met on its surface, two broken people mirroring each other's silence. I began to talk more about the baby we lost, about the night she disappeared, about the note that said, "Forgive me." Her fingers tightened around her pen until it snapped. The sound startled both of us. A clean break, a sound too familiar. "I'm sorry," she whispered, lowering her gaze. Her voice cracked on the word sorry, as if it had rusted from disuse. I didn't say anything. I wanted her to fill the silence with truth, but instead, she reached for another pen, rebuilt her composure, and said, "Please, continue." So I did, not because I wanted healing, but because I wanted to see how long she could pretend. In one session, it started raining. The sound against the window was soft, rhythmic, like a lullaby for grief. She watched it for too long before realizing I'd gone quiet. "I used to love the rain," I said, voice low. "She used to paint when it rained, said it made colors softer, easier to forgive." A shadow passed over her face, brief but unmistakable. Then she smiled, small and strained. "That's beautiful," she murmured, though I knew she wasn't talking about the story. That night I couldn't sleep. Her expression haunted me. The way her lips trembled on the word beautiful. The way her eyes refused to meet mine after. Was she mourning me? Or the version of herself she'd left behind? Session 7. The day the mask almost slipped. She asked, if she were here now, what would you say to her? It was the first time she referred to the woman in my story like a living person. Not a concept, not a ghost. Her voice quivered on her. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. "I'd ask her why she thought running away was love," I said softly. "I'd tell her I would have forgiven her, that all I ever wanted was for her to stay." Her breath hitched, and for the first time she didn't write anything down. Her eyes lifted, meeting mine, and for a heartbeat, I saw it. The storm she'd buried beneath professionalism. Tears she'd trained herself not to shed. "I think," she began, then stopped, swallowed hard. "Sometimes people leave because they think staying will destroy the person they love." Her voice cracked on destroy. Then she smiled, faint, rehearsed, and added, "Anyway, that's just a theory." But her eyes were screaming apologies she couldn't say. Week after week, I let her peel me open. Every memory I offered was a mirror I held up to her, and she bled a little more with each reflection. One day, I brought the sketchbook. Her sketchbook. The one I'd found in a drawer after she left. I placed it on the table between us. She froze. The color drained from her face. Her fingers twitched like she wanted to reach for it, but professionalism chained her wrists. "I found this," I said quietly. In it, she painted me 100 different ways, smiling, crying, breaking. And on the last page, I paused, watching her flinch before I even spoke the words. She painted me with a hole where my heart should be. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. Instead, she whispered, "She must have loved you deeply." "No," I said, leaning forward, my voice barely more than breath. "She must have loved me fearfully." Our sessions grew heavier after that, less like therapy, more like penance. Each time I spoke, she trembled a little more, her facade cracking like old paint. Sometimes she'd reach for the sketchbook, tracing the edges as if touching an old wound. Other times, she'd go silent, lost somewhere I couldn't follow. And then came the day she finally broke. It was late. The clinic was empty. Rain drummed softly outside, the city blurred behind wet glass. I just finished talking about the day of the miscarriage, the blood, the panic. The way her hand slipped from mine in the hospital room as she whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked up. She wasn't writing. She was crying. Quietly, like someone who'd forgotten how. "I couldn't bear to see your face without seeing his," she whispered. Her voice was so fragile I almost missed it. For a moment, the world stilled. Even the rain held its breath. "I thought leaving would help," she continued, "that if I disappeared, maybe you'd stop seeing death every time you looked at me." Her words hit like a tide, slow, inevitable, drowning. All the anger I'd been hoarding began to crack. "Yun-ha," I said, her name trembling on my tongue after 2 years of exile. She looked up, startled. It was the first time I'd said her name aloud since she returned. The sound of it broke something sacred between us. "I never blamed you," I whispered. I only blame the silence you left behind." Her tears fell freely now, soaking the papers between us. Notes, diagnoses, useless words meant to fix what love had shattered. "I didn't know how to come back," she said. "I thought you'd moved on. I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought you hated me." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I almost reached across the desk. Almost. But grief is cruel. It keeps distance even when forgiveness is close enough to touch. The clock on the wall ticked quietly. The rain slowed to a whisper. And between us, something shifted. Not healing, not yet, but the first crack of light after years of darkness. She wiped her tears, gathering her papers like armor. "I think that's enough for today," she said softly, voice trembling. I nodded, standing slowly. But before I turned to leave, I said the one thing I'd held inside for too long. "You're not the only one who couldn't bear to look," I said. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw both of you. Him and you. And it hurt too much to forgive either. She looked at me then. Truly looked. No mask, no pretense. Just a woman staring at the wreckage she left behind. "Then why are you here?" she whispered. I smiled. Because pain has patience, and I think mine is finally running out. When I stepped into the rain, the air felt cleaner. The city lights shimmered like fading stars. For the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted, just heavy. Behind me, I knew she was still watching from the window. Maybe wondering if I'd come back. Maybe wishing I wouldn't. But one truth settled quietly in my chest as I walked away. She remembered everything. And now, so did I. It was raining again the day she told me the truth. Not a gentle drizzle this time, but a storm, the kind that claws at windows and makes the sky bruise with memory. It felt fitting. The weather always seemed to know before I did when something was about to break. She stood by the window of her office, arms crossed, her reflection trembling in the glass. Her white coat hung loosely from her frame, like she was still learning how to fit into this new version of herself. And for the first time since she returned, she didn't hide behind that professional mask. "Jun," she said quietly. Not Mr. Han, not Sir, just Jun. My name. Soft, aching, familiar. I froze. It was the sound of a door unlocking somewhere deep inside me. She turned slowly, her face pale beneath the muted light. Her eyes were the color of winter, still, fragile, waiting for forgiveness that hadn't yet come. "I owe you the truth," she said. And just like that, the room became a confessional. "I didn't just leave," she began. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "I was falling apart, Jun. After the miscarriage, something in me broke. I couldn't breathe in that apartment without hearing him cry. Without hearing you." She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. Every sound, every smell, it all reminded me that I failed. That my body failed us. I'd wake up and see the empty crib we never got to use, and I'd start to shake. Her words were soft, but each one sliced open something raw. I wanted to speak, to say you didn't fail, but the words caught in my throat like glass. Because back then, I'd thought her silence was coldness. I'd thought she'd chosen to stop loving me. But now, I saw it. How wrong I'd been. She hadn't been cold. She'd been burning from the inside. "I went to a doctor," she continued. "They said it was postpartum depression, but it was more than that. PTSD, they called it. I kept seeing blood every time I closed my eyes. And your face." She inhaled sharply, tears trembling on her lashes. "Your face looked like guilt I couldn't escape." She turned away, shoulders trembling. "I thought disappearing was mercy, Jun. That if I vanished, maybe you'd heal. Maybe you'd stop carrying my pain." I laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was disbelief. "Mercy?" I said softly. "You call that mercy? You didn't free me, Yun-ha. You buried me alive." The words hit harder than I meant them to. She flinched, her eyes glassy, but she didn't look away. "I know," she whispered. "I know what I did, and I've carried it every day since." The rain thickened against the glass, blurring the city lights behind her. It looked like the world itself was crying for us. "I tried to come back," she said after a moment. "I really did. I packed my things, found the courage to face you, but when I reached your apartment," she laughed weakly, hollowly. "You were gone." I looked up sharply. "Gone? You'd moved," she said. "The landlord told me you'd left the city, that you said there was nothing left for you there." I remembered that day now. The way I couldn't bear to look at the empty hallway, the smell of turpentine still clinging to the walls. I'd left without saying goodbye to the ghosts. She continued. "So I changed my name, moved here, tried to start over. New city, new patients, a new life I thought wouldn't hurt to live." Her hands were shaking now, the truth spilling out like something that had been festering too long. "But then," she said softly, "you walked in that day, and everything I'd buried came rushing back." The silence that followed was suffocating. Only the storm dared to speak for us. Lightning flashed, painting her tears silver. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to hold her. I didn't know which instinct would kill me first. "So, all this time," I said slowly, "you weren't trying to help me heal. You were trying to heal yourself." She nodded, barely. "I told myself it was coincidence, that fate wasn't cruel enough to do this to us. But the moment I saw you, I knew." Her voice cracked. "I wasn't here as your doctor, Jun. I was here because I needed to ask you something I was too much of a coward to say back then." She looked up, and in her eyes, I saw everything I'd once loved, everything I'd once lost. "I came back," she whispered, "to ask if you could forgive me." The world seemed to pause. The rain, the thunder, my heartbeat. They all slowed into a fragile silence that filled the room like breath held too long. Forgive her? The woman who left me with a single note and an echo of what could have been? But her voice, her trembling voice, wasn't the voice of the woman who'd left. It was the voice of the woman who'd suffered alone, who'd been drowning quietly while I mistook her silence for cruelty. Still, forgiveness wasn't a door you just opened because someone knocked. It was a house you had to rebuild from ashes. I took a slow breath. "Do you even know what forgiveness costs?" I asked. She nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes," she said. "It costs everything I've been carrying, and maybe everything you still are." I walked closer. Every step felt like crossing through years of grief. When I stopped, we were only a breath apart. The scent of rain and lavender clung to her. It was the same perfume she wore the day she told me she was pregnant. Funny how even pain remembers sweetness. "Look at me," I said. She did, and in that moment, there were no doctor and patient, no guilt and punishment, just two people who'd forgotten how to exist without each other. "You could have told me," I whispered. "I would have stayed. I would have held you through every sleepless night." She shook her head. "No, Jun. You think you would have. But you don't know what I became. I hated myself. I hated my reflection. I thought if I stayed, I'd turn that hate on you too." Her tears were quiet now, falling onto the floor between us. Tiny, translucent ghosts. "I wanted to live," she said, voice trembling, "but I didn't know how to live without running." I reached out then, hesitant, unsure. My fingers brushed her wrist and she didn't pull away. Her pulse was frantic beneath my touch. Alive. Real. "Running didn't save you," I murmured. "It only made the distance longer." Her breath hitched, and for a fleeting second she leaned into the touch. Then she stepped back, shaking her head as if afraid of her own longing. "I can't ask you to love me again," she said. "I know that's gone, but I needed you to know. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you." She wiped her tears and gave a small, broken smile. "I left because I loved you too much to let you keep drowning in me." That sentence pierced deeper than any accusation could. Because it was true. All along, she thought her absence would be a gift. But love isn't mercy when it leaves you bleeding. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air was thick with the weight of everything we never said, everything we never got to fix. I glanced at the sketchbook still sitting on her desk, the one filled with fragments of the man she used to know, and I wondered if I should leave her one too. A story about two people who mistook love for atonement. But then she looked up at me again, and I realized this wasn't the end of our story. Not yet. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally. Her lips parted, a silent plea. "But I can understand you. And maybe that's the beginning." Her eyes softened, glimmering with relief and sorrow all at once. "That's all I hoped for," she whispered. The storm outside began to fade, the thunder receding into distant rumbles. A fragile calm settled over us, as if the world itself was exhaling. I turned toward the door, my hand on the knob. But before I stepped out, I looked back one last time. "Yoon-ha," I said softly. She lifted her gaze. "Next week, let's stop pretending I'm just your patient." Her breath caught, and for the first time, she smiled. Not the mask she'd worn for years, but something raw, human, trembling with hope. "Okay," she whispered. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened like glass, reflecting fragments of light. For the first time in 2 years, the air didn't taste like grief. It tasted like something fragile and new. Forgiveness hadn't come yet. But maybe love didn't need to be perfect to begin again. And somewhere behind me, in that dimly lit office, I knew she was still standing by the window, watching the sky, wondering if the storm had finally passed, and whispering into the silence what she never dared to say aloud. "Thank you for still being the one I couldn't forget." The clock ticks louder than usual today. Each second stretches like a heartbeat that refuses to let go. The air in her office feels heavier, too still, too aware. Maybe it knows this is goodbye. She sits across from me, her hands folded neatly in her lap, but her knuckles are pale from how tightly she's holding herself together. There's something almost sacred about this silence between us. It isn't awkward. It isn't angry. It's the silence of two people standing at the edge of something they've already lost and somehow survived. Her hair catches the afternoon light as it slips through the blinds, glinting like embers. For a moment, I see her as she once was, barefoot in our tiny apartment, paint smudged on her cheek, humming softly as the morning sun kissed her hair. The memory hits so suddenly that I have to look away. She clears her throat. "How have you been feeling, Jun?" Her voice is calm, professional, but it trembles at the edges. Even after all these weeks, she's still pretending to be my doctor, still hiding behind her title, as if that could protect either of us. I take a breath, and then, finally, I decide to stop pretending too. "I've been learning," I say quietly. Her brow lifts slightly. "Learning?" I nod. That forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about not letting it own me anymore. Her eyes flicker. Guilt, surprise, a flash of pain she tries to hide. I can almost see her thinking, "Don't say it yet, not like this." But the truth is already climbing its way out of me. "I forgive you, Eun-ha." The words hang in the air between us, trembling like fragile glass. For a moment, neither of us breathes. She blinks once, twice, then laughs softly as if she can't believe she heard me right. It's a small, broken sound, beautiful in its disbelief. "Why?" she whispers. "After everything I did, why would you?" I lean back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Because holding on to the pain doesn't bring Ari back. It doesn't bring you back either. And I think I deserve peace more than I deserve revenge. Her lips part, and her breath shakes like someone just opened a door in a room she's been trapped in for years. Her shoulders sag, the weight of her guilt finally slipping off in quiet surrender. "I don't deserve it," she murmurs. "I know, I say softly. But that's not the point. A long silence settles between us, gentle, almost forgiving. Outside, rain begins to fall again. Always the rain, returning like an old witness to our story. She wipes her eyes, and for the first time since she came back into my life, she smiles. Not the forced, professional kind. The real one. The one I thought I'd never see again. It's fragile, crooked, a little painful, but it's real. "Thank you," she says. Her voice is a whisper, but it feels like a confession, like a prayer finally answered. I nod, not trusting my voice. Something inside me loosens, quiet and steady, like the first breath after drowning. She stands up slowly, reaching for the folder on her desk, pretending to sort through papers to hide the tremor in her hands. Her office looks different now, warmer somehow. Maybe because we finally stopped pretending it was just a room for healing. Maybe because, in a way, it was a tomb that became a chapel. I rise to my feet, ready to leave. This should be the part where we say goodbye and walk away into our separate futures. But when I turn toward the door, she stops me. "Wait," she says softly. Her voice is small, trembling with something that feels like courage and fear mixed together. She opens the drawer of her desk and takes out a small sealed envelope. It's off-white, slightly creased, as if she's held it too many times, afraid to let it go. "I was going to give this to you after the first session," she says, walking toward me. "But I wasn't ready then. Maybe you weren't either." She places it gently in my hand. Her fingers brush against mine, warm, trembling, familiar. It feels like an apology and a goodbye in one touch. "What is it?" I ask. Her eyes soften. Something I fixed. When I leave her office, the rain has stopped again. The world smells of wet earth and second chances. I walk until I find a bench near the park. The same park where we used to sit on lazy Sunday mornings, where she'd sketch strangers while I wrote about them. I sit down, staring at the envelope in my hand. For a moment, I hesitate. Then I open it. Inside is a single sheet of sketch paper. The graphite smudges slightly under my thumb as I unfold it. It's me, standing beneath a tree, holding a small child in my arms. The same painting she'd torn apart 2 years ago. But now, it's whole again. The edges where it was once ripped have been mended. The tears almost invisible except for faint silver lines that glimmer under the light. She didn't hide the scars. She traced over them with gold ink, like kintsugi, the art of mending broken things with beauty. I stare at it, and suddenly everything inside me cracks open. The man in the sketch isn't broken. He's smiling, peaceful, eyes closed, head tilted toward the child in his arms. And the child, drawn in delicate, trembling strokes, reaches up to touch his face. Under the tree, the ground is scattered with fallen petals. At the bottom, in her familiar handwriting, there's a single line. "Some things aren't lost. They're just waiting to be seen differently." The tears come quietly. Not the violent kind that leave you gasping, but the soft ones, born from the simple realization that you've survived. The rain begins again, lighter this time, like a blessing. And for once, I don't run from it. I sit there, letting it fall on the sketch, on my hands, on everything we used to be. For 2 years, I thought forgiveness was a destination. But now I understand. It's a path. And maybe, somewhere on that path, we'll both learn how to walk without limping. I take one last look at the sketch, then carefully fold it back into the envelope. It's not just paper. It's proof that something shattered can still become beautiful again. That night, I light a candle by the window of my apartment, the same window where she once painted at sunrise. The flame flickers gently, reflected in the glass, surrounded by the dark city outside. I take out her sketch again and tape it to the wall above my desk, right where my old unfinished manuscript used to hang. Then I open my notebook, the first page still blank since the day she left. My pen hesitates, and then, finally, I start to write. Chapter 1. When Love Was Still Kind. The words pour out like breath, like release. They aren't perfect. They aren't even meant to be read by anyone else. But they are alive, and that's enough. A week later, I receive a letter. No return address, just a folded piece of stationery that smells faintly of turpentine and rain. Inside, her handwriting again. Small, neat, trembling. Jun, I won't ask you to find me. But if one day, by accident or by grace, you pass by a gallery with a painting of a man holding a child beneath a tree, know that I kept my promise. I finished it this time. Thank you for letting me go without hate. Nha. I read the letter 3 times before I can breathe again. And then, for the first time since that day in the hospital, I whisper her name out loud. Not in anger, not in grief. Just softly, with gratitude. Nha. The city hums quietly outside my window. The candle burns lower. The sketch glows faintly in the dim light. And in that fragile silence, I realize something. Some stories don't end with a kiss or a reunion. Some end with a quiet kind of peace. The kind that whispers, you survived it, and that's enough. When I finally close my eyes, I dream of Eri for the first time in years. Not as a loss, but as light. She's laughing, chasing petals beneath that same tree. Nha is there too, painting under the golden sky. And I'm watching them, smiling. Not because we got our happy ending, but because we learned how to live without erasing each other. The dream fades with the dawn, and when I wake, the world feels new again. It happened quietly, so quietly that the world barely noticed. No thunder, no tears, no cinematic ending, just an empty chair in her office, a faint trace of her perfume lingering in the air, and a silence that felt strangely merciful. They told me she'd resigned. No forwarding address, no personal calls. Dr. Nha needed time off, the receptionist said, avoiding my eyes. Time off. That was their way of saying she disappeared again. For a moment, the old panic surged, the same kind that used to claw at my ribs whenever I woke up to an empty side of the bed. But this time, it didn't consume me. This time, I understood. Because I could still see her face from our last session. The way her smile trembled like sunlight on rippling water. The way her eyes, those storm-torn eyes, had finally softened. It was the kind of smile that didn't belong to a woman running away. It belonged to someone finally setting herself free. The city carried on, indifferent to our ending. People hurried past me, coffee cups in hand, laughter echoing against glass towers. I walked among them, a ghost no longer tethered to grief, just quietly observing. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of a woman with short hair crossing the street, or a soft voice in a cafe that made me turn. And each time, for a heartbeat, I thought it might be her. But the ache that followed wasn't sharp anymore. It was tender, almost reverent. Because I realized something. Love doesn't always stay. Sometimes it leaves to teach you how to stand alone. One evening, I went back to the river where we first met. The wind carried the scent of rain and memories. It was autumn again, the same season that had taken everything from us years ago. But this time, I didn't come to mourn. I brought the sketch she left me, the one she'd sealed in that envelope. Me holding a child beneath a tree. When I unfolded it, the paper trembled in the breeze, alive with color and forgiveness. The once torn lines were whole again, every stroke breathing redemption. She'd drawn it exactly how I remembered. A man, weary but smiling. A child, looking up with wonder. And above them, a canopy of golden leaves that seemed to whisper, "It's okay now." I sat by the water and watched the reflection of that sketch dance on the ripples. For the first time, I didn't feel haunted. I felt seen. As if somewhere out there, she was sketching again, not of me, but of herself, rebuilding piece by piece. Maybe she was in another city, walking unfamiliar streets under unfamiliar skies. Maybe she'd opened a new clinic. Maybe she'd finally learned to forgive herself. I didn't need to know. Some stories are meant to end off-screen, in the quiet places where healing takes root. The following week, I started writing again. It began as fragments, sentences scattered like fragile glass. But with each word, something inside me steadied. I wrote about a man who lost everything, and a woman who left not out of hate but love, twisted by grief. And I realized I wasn't just writing her story. I was writing mine. My publisher said it was the most honest thing I'd ever written. I smiled, but didn't tell her that the honesty came from a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. Sometimes, at night, I still talk to her. Not aloud, just in thought. I tell her how the garden she loved is blooming again, how I've learned to cook without burning the rice, how the house feels lighter, like it finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. And in those quiet conversations, I swear I can almost hear her answer, not in words, but in the hush between them, like the pause before a brush touches canvas, or the silence after the final note of a song, a silence that says, "You did well." The seasons turned as they always do. Winter bled into spring, and the city began to bloom again. I found myself drawn to a small art gallery one afternoon, one I'd never noticed before. Inside, the walls were lined with soft watercolors, dreamlike, fragile, full of emotion. And then I saw it. A painting of a man and a woman beneath a tree. The same tree from her sketch, only this time, the man was alone. The woman had become light, soft, translucent, fading into the wind. But the expression on the man's face wasn't sorrow. It was peace. There was no artist's name written below, only 2 words. For Ari. My chest tightened. My fingers trembled against the frame. She'd found her way back, not to me, but to the world. And that was enough. Outside, the sky was painted in dusk. The clouds parted just enough for the first stars to peek through, shy and uncertain. I stood there for a long time, the cool wind brushing against my skin, and for the first time in years, I smiled without weight. Because love doesn't always end in reunion. Sometimes it ends in understanding, and that understanding becomes a quiet goodbye. When I got home, I placed the sketch she'd given me on my desk. The paper had aged slightly, edges curled, but the colors still breathed life. I framed it, this time not as a relic of pain, but as proof that broken things can be made whole again. And as I turned off the light, I whispered the words I never got to say when she left. Thank you for leaving. Thank you for coming back. And thank you for teaching me how to let go. That night, I dreamt of her for the first time in a long while. We were under that same tree, sunlight spilling through the leaves. She was smiling, peaceful, unburdened. When I reached out, she didn't vanish. She simply looked at me, her voice soft as wind. It's time. When I woke, the dawn light was warm against my skin. The world outside was quiet, and for once, so was my heart. Because love had done its job. It had burned, broken, and rebuilt me. And now, there was only peace. The story was complete. And in the stillness that followed, I finally understood. The quiet goodbye was never an ending. It was a beginning. 2 years. It's strange how quietly life rearranges itself in the space of time. The grief that once lived in my bones now sleeps, deep and silent. The world, once colored in grief's grayscale, has slowly found its hue again. And yet, on quiet mornings, when the sky softens like wet paint, I still feel her presence brushing against my memory. Not as pain, but as peace. I never thought I'd write again, but healing has a way of sneaking back into your fingertips when you stop trying to control it. The words came to me one rainy afternoon, gentle at first, then all at once, like a confession that had been waiting its turn. I called it The Woman Who Erased Herself. It wasn't meant to be a love story. It was a requiem for the things we lose, for the versions of ourselves that vanish in the name of survival. I wrote about her without naming her, about the way she laughed like sunlight but broke like glass, about how she painted with her soul and ran from her own reflection. And when the book was done, I felt something uncoil inside me, like a ghost finally exhaling. When it was published, I didn't expect anyone to care, but the world, it seemed, had been waiting for a story like ours. The novel became my first bestseller. Messages poured in from strangers who said the book healed them, or destroyed them, or both. I smiled each time, wondering if she was among them, reading my words in some quiet corner of a city I'll never see. The dedication page reads, "For E.H., who taught me that some ghosts don't haunt, they heal." I stared at that line for hours before sending the manuscript off. Not because I doubted it, but because it was the truest sentence I'd ever written. Her initials, Yun-ha, felt like a heartbeat pressed into paper. I didn't write it for recognition. I wrote it because, for all the wreckage between us, she had taught me the hardest kind of love, one that releases instead of clings. The book signing was held in a small bookstore downtown. Rows of people wound through aisles lined with stories, the air thick with ink and murmurs. I sat behind a table scattered with fresh copies, my name printed across glossy covers that still felt foreign to me. Fans came and went, some shy, some teary-eyed, some thanking me for giving words to their unspoken grief. I smiled, signed, thanked them in return. Then, she appeared, at least I thought she did. A woman in a long beige coat, her hair tucked behind her ear. She didn't approach right away. She hovered near the back, watching me with a gaze that burned with familiarity and distance all at once. When our eyes met, my breath hitched. But before I could say anything, she stepped forward, placed a small folded note on the table, and whispered, "Thank you," before slipping back into the sea of faces. I tried to stand, to follow, but the crowd swallowed her whole. And maybe, deep down, I didn't need to chase her this time. Maybe this was her way of saying goodbye again, only softer. When the event ended, I finally unfolded the note. Her handwriting was still the same. Slanted, careful, like she was afraid of breaking the paper. It read, "Ari would have been proud of you." That was all. 6 words. But they undid me. I sat there long after the crowd had gone, the bookstore lights dimming one by one. The rain had started again outside, tapping gently against the glass, as if echoing a heartbeat that once existed between us. For a long moment, I stared at the note, my vision blurring. Not from sadness. No, sadness had finally learned its place. This was something else, something purer, something like grace. She remembered, not just me, not just the pain, but Ari, our child, the name we never got to call out loud, the life that had ended before it began. It was proof that love, even after all these years, hadn't vanished. It had simply changed its form. That night, I walked home under the rain without an umbrella. The city glowed in soft reflections, streetlights trembling in puddles, car headlights dissolving into mist. Every drop that touched my face felt like an absolution. By the time I reached my door, I wasn't sure if it was rain or tears soaking through my shirt. Inside, the house was warm. I lit a candle, poured tea, and sat by my desk. The framed sketch she'd given me, the one of me holding Ari under the tree, still hung on the wall. But tonight it looked different. The colors seemed brighter, the lines steadier, as if time itself had healed what we couldn't. On impulse, I took the note and placed it beside the sketch. The two pieces belonged together, her words and her art, both fragments of a love that had learned to exist without presence. Weeks passed. The book tour ended. The world moved on, as it always does. But I carried that note everywhere I went, folded neatly in my wallet, a quiet reminder that closure isn't found in answers but in acknowledgement. Sometimes when I visit the river, the same one that once witnessed our beginning and our unraveling, I take out the note and read it again. Not to ache, but to remember. The water keeps flowing, endless and forgiving, and in its current, I feel both of us carried forward. They say time heals all wounds. I don't believe that. Some wounds never close. They just learn to live quietly inside you. But healing. Healing is something else entirely. It's not forgetting. It's remembering without the knife. And I think that's what she gave me. Permission to remember gently. A year later, the novel was adapted into a film. During the premiere, people cried, applauded, clutched their chests as the credits rolled. When the dedication appeared on the big screen, the audience fell silent. In that stillness, I whispered her name beneath my breath, invisible among hundreds. It was my way of saying, "You made it here too." Outside the theater, as I stepped into the night, a breeze brushed against my coat. It carried the faint scent of lavender, the perfume she always wore. I smiled, looking up at the sky scattered with stars. Maybe it was nothing, or maybe it was her, watching from somewhere just out of reach, proud of the story we finally finished together. Sometimes people ask me if the book was based on a real person. I always pause, then say, "Not exactly. She was more of a memory that refused to die." They laugh, thinking it's a metaphor. But I know better. She lives between every line I've ever written, in every silence between words. Because the truth is, some love stories don't end in reunion. They don't need to. Love isn't a destination. It's the road that changes you on the way. The last page of The Woman Who Erased Herself reads, "If you ever loved someone enough to let them go, then you already know the ending of this story. Because love doesn't always return. Sometimes it simply sets you free." When I read that aloud at events, I could almost feel her hand in mine again. Steady, warm, no longer trembling. And in that invisible moment, I understand. We didn't fail. We simply finished what was meant to be finished. Tonight, the city is quiet. The candle flickers beside me. The note, the sketch, and the first copy of my book sit together on the desk, like a shrine to everything we were and everything we became. Outside, rain begins to fall again, soft and rhythmic, the same melody that once carried our grief. I close my eyes and listen. In the hush of it all, I hear her voice, calm, distant, but real. "Ari would have been proud of you." And for the first time in years, I whisper back, not with sorrow, but with gratitude. I know. Because love, real love, doesn't always come back to you in flesh and heartbeat. Sometimes it returns as ink on paper, as wind in the night, as peace in the quiet spaces of your soul. It doesn't demand a second chance. It leaves behind a story, and that's enough. And so, 2 years later, standing at the end of everything, I finally understand. Some love stories don't end in reunion. They end in peace. And maybe that's the most beautiful ending of all.